Greetings, everybody! I hope you guys are doing fine. Guess what? The Druid Swordsman is back. Yes, another iteration of the famous, one of your favorite builds, the Druid Swordsman. Also, one of my favorite builds. I like the playstyle. I really like just what the build can do, and just the fact that we can play an AoE playstyle with Sword and Board. It's just something that's near and dear to my heart, because I like AoE. And back in the day, we're talking back in the day, you couldn't do decent AoE builds with Sword and Board. Ever since they changed that, I just love that, especially on the Warden. It feels so good. It's so strong. So let's just jump right into it, I guess. Okay, let's look at the stats here. 34k stamina, not too shabby. Almost 30k health. Wow, that's a lot of health for a medium armor build. And then 15.5k magicka. Also, not too shabby. If we look at the recoveries, oh, they look good. They look good. Of course, we have a lot of recoveries on this build. This is not even fully buffed. This goes up to, I can't even tell you how far up this goes. It is amazing. I mean, we could technically, let's just try it here. Let's just dodge a lot here, because as you can imagine, we're running the Torque of Tonal Constancy, and as such, we do have a lot of regens if we drop our resources below a certain point. So this alone gets up to, like, look at this, 1700 magicka recovery and 2800 stamina. This is a lot. This is a lot. And that's not nearly all. Of course, you get 200 extra regen from your Betty Netch, like the Bull Netch. You get another 20% extra when you use a pot. So we're like, forget about it. Forget about it. You have sustain for days, my friends. You have sustain for days. So don't you worry about it. Let's buff up here for the weapon damage. 3.5k. You might say, oh, that's not very high. It goes up further, of course. When we light attack and when we're fully buffed, I think we're sitting at, what's the value? I think like 4.5k, which is you might say that's still not very much, but you don't need that much. We have a decent amount of stamina. We are on a Warden, so the Warden gets built-in damage increasers. So you can put 20% extra damage on whatever you think the build is going to do, because just how Warden works. We talked about this in the last Warden build video. The Warden just has easy access to minor vulnerability, easy access to minor berserk, easy access to an extra damage buff through the advanced species passive, and there's just so much damage coming in. Even if you don't build for high damage numbers, you'll still get a lot of damage. It's one of the things I really like about the Warden. Let's give it a shot here. Let's look at the resistances. 20k on both, not too shabby for a medium armor build, and then of course 3.5k critical resists. The physical penetration goes up to like 11k, 11.5k. It's also not too shabby, but not super high. But like I said, we don't need it. We don't really need it. The Mundus for this one is, of course, the Warrior. Getting a little extra weapon damage here is pretty nice, especially for the heals, I would say. That's the main reason we went for it. You could, like, for damage purposes, there's other things that you could do. Of course, you can go for more penetration if you want, or crit damage would also be pretty good. But I think the Warrior, just because it benefits the heals as well, I think is the best. We are a vampire. You don't have to. I always say that you don't have to be a vampire if you don't want to. But I would recommend, if you don't want to play a vampire on a build, just any build, drop it to stage 1. There's no real need to really get rid of vampire completely. So if you don't really need it in any like meaningful way, then just drop it down to stage 1. You're fine. Okay. And then of course we're running the Dubious as our food buff, because you know it's cheap, it's a good food buff. We need a drink buff for this because we're running the Bone Pirate. So Dubious is doing fine here. If you want to use a different drink buff, feel free, but I think Dubious is the perfect choice here. Let's look at the sets. Like I mentioned, we're running Bone Pirate on the body here, and on the jewelry, the weapons, and the one pauldron piece here, Eternal Vigor, which is just one of the best sets right now. It gives so much regen. It's amazing. I love it. It's just, you can use this as a base set for basically any build, Magicka or Stamina, and it just fuels you with so much regen. It's amazing. I love it. I really do. Then we're running one piece Molakena here, just for, you know, just to fill up the one slot, and then of course, as I mentioned, the Torque of Tonal Constancy, which is also a sustained powerhouse. And these two in combination, man, that's a lot. That's just a lot of regen. And then of course we get extra regen and extra stamina from our Bone Pirate. That's why I chose that. You could go for something else other than Bone Pirate if you want. What I wanted is, I wanted to build damage and sustain, and I still think Bone Pirate is one of the best damage slash sustain sets, because it gives you a decent chunk of stamina, which of course directly translates into your damage. And then you have the stam recovery on the 3-piece, on the 5-piece, and then of course if you're using a drink buff that has some stam recovery in it, you also get that. So you get a lot of damage and regen out of this. So as always, infused on the big pieces with Tri-Stat enchants, and then impan on the small pieces with stamina enchants, or, you know, this one here is health. Depending on what you want. You could even go for a little more Magicka, although we have a lot of Magicka regen, so you don't really need it. It's kind of hard to get the Magicka bar to be empty, to be quite honest. You have to cast a lot of buffs. Feel free to double cast them just to get the Magicka down, just so you can get the stamina buff for your Torque of Tonal Constancy. So yeah, I don't think we need any extra Magicka here. So yeah. The jewelry, I went for the healthy here. I think this is actually a pretty good way to build it, because you could technically, if you're not using the Bone Pirate, I would suggest running the Lava Foot with Eternal Vigor, just to get more stamina and more stamina regen out of it. So the Lava Foot would be very, very nice if you're not using the Bone Pirate. So let's say you're using, I don't know, New Moon Acolyte, whatever, you know, use your favorite damage set. Then you could definitely put the Lava Foot on and just get a ton of stamina and a ton of stamina regen. That would work really well. So I think healthy on the rings is not the worst choice, to be honest, because as you saw, we have 30k health on a medium armor build, and I kind of like that, because we're not very tanky. We didn't really build for tankiness, so having the extra health does a lot for you. It just makes you so much more durable. So I like that a lot. And then of course Torque of Tonal Constancy is Triune by default. I would keep that. It's a good try to have. I really wouldn't change that. On the weapons, Sharpened on the front bar. You could go Nirnhound if you want, but I think Sharpened for a little extra penetration does a good job here. Shock damage enchant. You don't have to do this, you know. I just keep it on because I switch the set out a lot of, to other tunes and do other builds with it. So I keep the shock damage on because, as you know, shock damage can proc the minor vulnerability, which we don't need. We have easy access to. So feel free to put on what you want. But, you know, it doesn't hurt here either. It doesn't hurt here because you can just reapply it on multiple targets. If you have the shock damage plus your fetcher flies, which we're gonna use for the buff. So it doesn't hurt, but you know, things like the foulness enchant, which can heal debuff people, is a good option if you're looking for something else than shock damage. Then of course the shield infused with a Tri-Stat enchants. just to bulk up the overall stats of the build. That's the way I like it. And then, of course, as always, infused the back bar bow with the weapon damage enchant. That's just the best way to get extra damage, I think, in my opinion. I mean, this is like 450 weapon damage, and this it goes up to like over 500 weapon damage after like the scaling and stuff like that. That is a lot of damage just for light attacking someone on the back bar. So that's definitely the way to go, in my opinion. And yeah, that's about the sets. Let's look at the skill loadout here. On the front bar, we got Sub Assault. Of course, you know it. It's the bread and butter burst damage on a Warden. Really nice. 3-second cooldown, 3-second delay. That way, you can really line up some burst and make sure you do a nice combo that hits all at the same time. And of course, it debuffs your enemy and takes away 5k of their armor, which, you know, is really nice. That's a hefty debuff. 5k is immense. So you get a lot more penetration out of this than you can see on the stat sheet, as I mentioned. The next one is Cutting Dive. This one is basically a ranged spammable. It adds a bleed and it adds some off balance, which is really nice. Because off balance, of course, if you have the right CP setup, it's going to increase your damage by 10%. And the bleed definitely doesn't hurt, so that's a good way to prime people. It's also it's a good part of a combo. So just so you know, the combo that I'm usually going for, I usually put the Fetcher Flies, the Growing Swarm, on people, just to, you know, have them debuffed already. Then I cast the Sub Assault. Then I cast the Dive. While the Dive is flying in, I'm invasioning people. You know, I'm gap closing them, knocking them down, and then comes the Deep Slash. Maybe even a Dawnbreaker for good measure. If you have multiple targets, or you have a tanky target, just crack the Dawnbreaker, give him the business. But yeah, that's basically the combo. So, pretty good skill, pretty cheap to cast too, which I really like. And of course, the bleed damage together with the dot from the Growing Swarm kind of helps a little bit, you know, puts a little extra pressure on. The next skill we have is Deep Slash. You know the drill. Deep Slash is the AoE sword and board skill. I like that one a lot. It reduces the movement speed by 30%, which can help you. And of course, it applies minor maim to targets, which reduces their damage done to you by 15%. So this is kind of a tanking tool, if you want. And yeah, so that alone is, you know, it's a big debuff. 15% less damage taken, it's not bad. And we got some other things, you know. In the end, we can be quite tanky for a medium armor build, but, you know, it's not the focus. The next one, as I mentioned, Invasion here. Great gap closer and a great stun, both in one. So if you're looking for a good way to, you know, gap close and stun people, Invasion is the best skill, in my opinion. You don't need an extra stun, because you can cast this like up front. Even if you're like right in front of somebody, you can still just invasion them. It's really fast, it's very snappy, just knocks them down real quick. And yeah, the stun can be very, very long. You know, as you can see, it's a 4-second stun, and it can be up to 50% longer based on the distance traveled. So especially when you're like chasing a Sork and they're just streaking away all the time, and you just barely make the invasion. You know, you're barely in range, and you just make the full distance travel. You end up with like a 6-second stun, I think. And that's a lot, especially if the Sork is out of stamina. Having the 6-second stun it looks quite funny, because it feels like forever. They just lie on the ground, they can't get up. It's fun. It's a really strong skill. I like this one a lot. The next one is Bird of Prey. This is, of course, for movement speed, which we, you know, don't necessarily need, because we also have the bow, so we can get the movement speed off of the bow dodge roll. But when the stamina is low, getting the speed buff to get away from a target, from people chasing you, That's pretty good. And then, of course, you get the Minor Berserk. That's what I'm talking about. Easy access just for having it slotted. It's such a nice skill. It really is. And then, of course, for the ultimate Dawnbreaker of Smiting, don't really have to say anything about this. It hits like a truck. It adds a pretty nasty dot on top of that, and it knocks everybody down. End of story. Approved. Next one, on the back bar, we got Resolving Vigor, which is our only heal on this build. So you gotta be quick on your toes. You wanna keep the vigor up. You wanna dodge. You wanna block. You wanna reflect. You wanna do all the things, because this is not a healing powerhouse. You gotta pay attention. Hate to break it to you, but you gotta pay attention. So, and the next one is, of course, Shimmering Shield. This is, honestly, guys, I talked about this many times before, but I gotta say it again. This is a tanking powerhouse. Every time I use it, I'm so surprised how strong it is. If you have people attacking you with projectiles, you are basically, I don't know, you're God. No one can hurt you. Because this thing absorbs a lot of damage. It gives you the major heroism for absorbing projectiles. And it gives you magicka back. So in the end, this thing is super cheap as well. It costs you like 1.5k magicka to cast. You know, after you get the magicka back from absorbing projectiles. I can tell you, I stayed alive. I stayed alive for so long, having literally 0 health, no stamina, to cast a heal, just magicka to keep the Shimmering Shield up. And I just stayed alive for so long, and I got away from so many fights. Without this, I would have died so easily. You know, just one arrow hits you and you're dead. And it just doesn't happen because you're just absorbing everything. So this is borderline cheating. I gotta say, it's borderline cheating. I should report myself for using it, but god damn it, is it a good skill. I love this one. The next one, we talked about this, Growing Swarm. You know, I use this instead of Poison Injection. You know, this is usually where my Poison Injection would be. Since I don't want to use both, I just put the Growing Swarm on. So I still have the option of hitting someone with a damage over time skill. And of course, it can spread out to other people, do some physical damage to them as well. But the best thing about it is the minor vulnerability. 8% extra damage for applying it to a target. So make sure you always apply this before you go in for a combo, because 8% extra damage is 8% extra damage. You don't want to miss this. Next skill, Ice Fortress. Of course, this is our main armor buff, and it gives you major protection, which, you know, it stacks up. You have 8% here. You got the 15% here from the minor maim, and you know, as you can see, we're running the permafrost on the back bar, another 30%. So when shit hits the fan, you can become quite tanky. You can become quite tanky. So, you know, keep that in mind. But this is not a tank build, so you know, adjust your expectations here a little bit. This is quite expensive, but you have a lot of magicka recovery, so feel free to like alternate between those two skills, Shimmering Shield and Ice Fortress, to get your magicka down, just so you can have the extra stamina recovery from your Torque of Tonal Constancy. The next skill, Bull Edge, we talked about this. This is basically 200 stamina regen. You know, if you do the math, roughly like 200 stamina regen that you get on top of the regen that you already have. The nice thing about the regen you can get from this is it goes through everything. It goes through block, it goes through sprint, it goes through sneak. So all the occasions where your normal stam regen would be cut off, this is still going to provide you with a little bit of extra stamina, which really helps. And then, of course, every 5 seconds it removes one negative effect, or if you recast the skill, you know, you can spam this and it's going to heal you a little bit. As you can see, like down in this region, you can see the heals pop up, 677, 1k, 677. So this helps. I explained this in the last video. If I'm taking a lot of pressure, I always go for a vigor and then into the Betty Netch spam, the Bull Netch spam. It helps. It's basically like 1k, roughly like 1k every second additional healing, and it of course removes all the negative effects that people put on you. So that's really nice. Yeah, that's what it's for. And like I said, permafrost, great tanking ultimate. You can use something else, you know, vampire ultimate. Even ice comet would be good, or you know, maybe if you want the heals here, you go for the healing ultimate, which is really cheap. So feel free to use whatever suits your playstyle best, but the permafrost is kind of nice when you're going into like a group. It helps you stay way more tanky. It helps you stay alive. It helps you do a little bit of extra damage. It's not crazy, but you know, you also reduce the move speed of people, which is kind of cool. And of course, you can chill enemies, which roots them, and you know, it's a good one. It's a good one. It's not even that expensive for how long it lasts. 12 seconds of major protection is it's a little crazy, actually. You know, and a build like that, like I said, you get the major heroism, so you have a lot of ultimate gen already. So this is up in no time. All right, so that's the skills. Let's move on to the CP here. Easy peasy, the red tree, as always, 51 ironclad, 77 resistant, 43 in hardy and elemental defender, and 56 in quick recovery. In the green tree, we got 37 in warlord, 19 in sprinter, 56 in mooncalf, 22 in arcanist, and 43 in tenacity. And then we got 56 in tumbling, 37 in shadow ward, and then, you know, when it comes to the blue tree, we of course go for the burst setup here. That's what we want. We want the burst. So 81 master at arms, 56 precise strikes, 77 piercing, and 56 mighty, just for like the beefy burst damage. And that's about it, guys. That's the build. The Druid Swordsman 3.0. I hope you guys like it. I hope you guys give it a shot. I like it a lot. It feels good. When it's max, and it's giving me the feels. So this one was fun to play, and yeah, I just love the playstyle. Sword and board bow. Yeah, that's a good one, guys. Do me the favor, like, comment, and subscribe, and you know, stay tuned for the next video. Stay safe out there, guys. See you next time.